All right, Lions fans, game two of the preseason is in the bag. The Lions inch out a win over the Chiefs 24-21. Let's talk about it. All right, Lions fans, what's going on? Happy Sunday to you. Yesterday in Kansas City, the Lions pulled out a 24-23 win in Kansas City. Preseason game number two. I just saw the game this Sunday afternoon, and I want to give my thoughts on it. As just like last week, the Lions played all backups. The Chiefs did come into the game with their starters intact, Mahomes and Kelsey and starting offensive line wanted to get a little bit of reps in there, but we did not put any starters on there, which is absolutely fine with me. Let's talk about what stood out. I have the stats up here on the screen. Today, I actually want to start with special teams. And I want to start with my man, Jake Bates, 4 for 4. His longest field goal being a 55-yarder. He did miss the extra point, but he did hit the game winner, which was from 43 yards. Now, Jake Bates is still trying to make this team. He's not a shoe-in just yet. We know that Badgley is hurt, but I think that he really showed yesterday, even in the preseason game, that he does have what it takes. Now, let's see what happens this week with another good week of practice and with this last preseason game. Jack Fox, as you can see, 4 punts, 216 yards with a 54.0 average, which means that he flipped the field every single time. But, what do we expect from Jack Fox at this point? Isaiah Williams, we're going to talk about him in a little bit when we talk about the receivers. 3 for 41 on punts, and the kick returns were okay. So with that being said, let me give a grade on it. Jack Fox, an A as usual. I'm actually gonna give my man Jake Bates an A as well. Let's talk about the offense. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. Last week, I said that Hendon Hooker, Nate Sudfeld, I didn't believe that he had a good game last week. I thought that he played a little bit better this week, but that one interception he threw was a bad interception. I agree with something that Golden Tate said in the telecast is that he looked as if the DB was running a route for him and he was throwing it to the DB. I mean, for a veteran quarterback, it was just a bad interception. And he also had a few plays where he overthrew receivers. As for Hendon Hooker, 12 for 15, 150 yards. Hendon also, had a rushing touchdown. 12 for 15 puts him at, let me see. I'm trying to see if they have it up on the screen. They actually don't have it up on the screen, but that puts him about in the maybe the 71% range. I thought the Hendon Hooker looked good once again. He was very patient. You can tell that he did not want to just take off and run with the ball. Now, when he ran for the touchdown, that was a good decision because no one was open. But even on that play, you can tell that he was still trying to find an open receiver. I thought that he showed good command. And as I said last week, I believe that we are in good hands with Hendon Hooker as the backup quarterback. I'm going to give Nate Sudfeld a C plus. I really don't remember what I gave him last week. Hendon Hooker, I'm going to give a B plus. Let's move on to the running backs. Vaki looked very well. He looked good again. I know we're looking at the 3.7 yard average that he had, 6 for 22, but it was what he did with the ball. When he got it, he made good cuts and he ran hard. And not to mention, he had 4 receptions for 60 yards. So he did a very good job, I believe, of moving us down the field. And listen, those receptions he had, they came right when we needed to get down the field and score a touchdown. Also, too, I was impressed with Zonovan Knight. He ran hard in this game, 8 for 36 yards, 4.5 average. Like I said, that may not look great on in the numbers, but it was the way he ran the ball. He ran the ball very hard. I'm going to give the backup running backs, I'll give them a solid B this time. And I want to say that Zonovan Knight made it very interesting in what we're going to do when it comes to number 3 and 4 running backs. Let's go to the receivers. I'm gonna just say it, Isaiah Williams. I know last week some of the people said Isaiah Williams stood out. I thought he was just okay. To me, he showed himself out this week. I already talked about his punt returns, and as you see what he did in the receiving game, 6 for 71 with 11.8 average. He didn't have any touchdowns, but when the young man caught the ball, he ran hard, and we see that they tried to run him. I want to say it was at least one time. The play didn't go anywhere, but it was. I'm sorry, he did get 11 yards on that play. That wasn't him that got stuffed in the backfield. We see that they were doing what they could to get this young man the ball. I thought that he played very well today, and I think that if he can bounce back and have a game like that next week, he has a very good chance of making the active roster on this team. As for the rest of the receivers, you can see the numbers on the screen. They were average at best. I still think that we're looking for that number 4 and 5 receiver. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Vaki looked good coming out of the backfield. Tom Kennedy had that great catch, the one where he caught, I want to say it was in the third quarter. He was in the air, the guy cut his legs out and he came down on his back, but still held on to the ball. He showed toughness. Donovan Peoples Jones, I mean, one reception. He did not do in this game what I was hoping for. I thought that James Mitchell would get targeted a little bit more. He had one reception for 13 yards. I will give these backup receivers, I'm going to give them a solid C plus. I thought about giving them a B minus just on the strength of how Vaki and Williams did, but let's go with a C plus. Now let's move over to, excuse me, before we go to the defense, let's talk about the offensive line. They did play a little bit better this week against the Chiefs than they did against the Giants. I thought they did much better in pass protection, but in the run, I still saw offensive linemen getting stood up and not necessarily getting the push that they needed. So I'm going to give the backup offensive lineman a C. Let's move on to the defense. Of course, the numbers that you see on the screen does not always tell the story, but I will go down this list and look at some people who stood out. Khalil Dorsey, I thought he did decent out there in coverage. He did have 5 tackles, but I'm more concerned with the coverage. I thought the DBs, in my opinion, struggled a little bit, especially when Patrick Mahomes was out there. Now, you might say, well, that's not fair. That's Pat Mahomes. It doesn't matter. These are all NFL players. I thought that Mick Robertson was up and down. He had a good coverage play. Then he gave up that touchdown where he just got beat by Worthy, but then he came back in the next series and had a good play. He had a pass where he got up high and deflected. So he was kind of here and there on in coverage. As for the linebackers, I thought the linebackers did a pretty average job, pretty much like they did last week. And then we'll get to the D line. I thought that the defensive tackles, Broderick Martin, for example, still did a good job this week with the interior rush. I thought that they did a good job collapsing the middle of the pocket. But as I said last week, there was still no edge rushing. Yes, Betts, I thought did a decent job coming off the edge. Actually, he looked pretty good. I mean, if Kaminsky's going to be out for a while, that guy maybe could take Kaminsky's spot coming in situational downs. But as far as the rest of the pass rush, except for the fourth quarter where Josh Pascal he did come up with a key pressure. He came up with it. He came up with the sack and the strip, and I'm going to give him credit for that, where he put the Lions inside of the Chiefs 10-yard line. I'm going to give him credit for that. But as a whole, through the whole game, I really did not see anything from the pass rush, which still concerns me because when the starters need a break, you need some guys who can come in and be situational pass rushers. James Houston is hurt again. So, we had hopes for him going into 2023. Now it's 2024. We had hopes for him this year, and he is hurt again, not out there being able to show the team what he can do. Nyman looked pretty decent. He had 5 tackles, 2 for a loss. Who else stood out on the defense? I want to say that Makai Wingo, he only had 1 tackle, but he did decent. They had him at defensive end. I don't really see him I see him more as a D tackle than a D end. But as I've mentioned several times now, not really any pass rush. So for the defensive line, because of the defensive tackles, I will give them a C plus. The linebackers, I'm also going to give a C plus. The DBs, I will give them a solid C because I do believe that Mahomes and Carson Wentz, and I forget the quarterback who came in third. Well, I guess I could just look him up. I got the stats up right here, so I'll give him some credit. Book, that's who it was. I'm thinking about those guys. I don't want to use a word like shredded. I mean, they didn't shred them, but they did a good job of finding open men in the zones, hitting guys open in the man. So I thought that the DBs left something to be desired, because remember, we're still trying to figure out somebody to move into that big nickel spot. All right, Lions fans, pretty much that's all I have for preseason week 2. As I mentioned, the team looked a lot better. The standouts this week to me would be Hendon Hooker stood out, and my man Jake Bates did a pretty good job of showing that he wants to make this team, that he can be the kicker to get us through 17 games and take us into the playoffs. All right, Lions fans, what did you think about the game? Were you impressed? Did you like the fact that our starters did not play again? I do, because we have guys that are hurt, and I don't want to see any other starters hurt going into the season. These guys know how to play football. Let's let these guys get a rest. And in what's that, 1, 2, 3 weeks from now, when the season starts, let's see them get out there and put it to the Rams and do what we can do. But were you impressed with the guys that were out there? Did you have any surprise players out there? Did you see anybody like I did, maybe Isaiah Williams and Jake Bates, guys that you believe can or should make this team? Maybe you like Betts on defense, and maybe you think that he should step in. Just tell me what you thought overall. Otherwise, Lion fans, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Go over to our Twitter/X page, which is flashing down on the bottom of the screen. Go over to our TikTok and follow us over there. That's all I got for Lions fans. Until next week when we talk about game 3, that's all for now. Peace.